Thank you, everyone. As she said, I'm the CTO for Project Liberty Labs, and two of the projects associated with Project Liberty Labs, one is DSNP, the Decentralized Social Networking Protocol, and the second is Frequency, a parachain in the Polkadot ecosystem specifically designed for social. I'm going to be talking today a bit about coinless users in the Web3 ecosystem and why that's so important. So the first step is why coinless users at all, or what do we even mean by coinless users? When we say coinless users, we literally mean users that have a wallet that don't have coins or tokens for the blockchains that they're interacting with. We think this opens up a number of possibilities from a scaling perspective, especially in the social space. The first reason why coinless users is what I would call the micropayments conundrum. Micropayments has been the future payment method of the web since the 90s, but they've never actually caught on. From an engineering perspective, the pay-as-you-go model of micropayments make a lot of sense, right? There's no breakage, there's no waste, and it's on demand. Even Elon Musk last year with Twitter announced that Twitter was going to support micropayments for news articles and news sources from a micropayments perspective for publishers. This is not the first time someone's proposed micropayments for news sources. It's not even the 10th time. But quick show of hands, how many of you in the last month, let's say, have used a micropayment to read a single news article? If you look here, when this was announced, this was a poll that was done around the same time they announced the Twitter support. The key thing to notice is only 1% of folks actually said that they would purchase the individual article. This is what we see throughout industries where subscription wins over the micropayment model. But today, on blockchain, this is the default journey. You get a wallet, you get some tokens, you connect your wallet to a DApp, and then you spend those tokens on the transactions that you do as part of the process. But each of those interactions But each of those interactions comes with a certain cognitive load. You have to make a decision effectively each time that you're spending. And when you add up the aggregate of all these decisions, you end up with something they actually call decision fatigue. And this is one of the key reasons why micropayments almost never catch on. This is part of the reason why even Apple moved from the 99-cent iTunes music purchase to the subscription model with Apple Music, right? So micropayments is one issue around why coinless users. Another is the culture of the web. The web has a culture of free, or maybe free in air quotes, right? Imagine a world where you paid for every single web page that loaded, or when you signed up for a service, you paid part of their AWS server hosting costs to process that request. Once again, that's sort of the reality in Web3 today, but for the last 25 years, users have been trained on the idea that those aren't things that cost anything. So you have a real cultural issue, a retraining issue, if you will, if you want users to spend on a per transaction basis. Now, free has created a lot of toxic online interactions because of the way that free was accomplished in Web 2. Surveillance economies, ad-focused networks, et cetera. But you can't overcome the issue from an adoption standpoint that users have this expectation. Another one is that despite what folks in this room might feel, it's actually still surprisingly difficult for the average person to acquire crypto. Everything from fiat on-ramps to KYC, jurisdictional issues, exchange fees. The barriers to onboarding users are huge. So if the first step that you have for any experience is go get tokens before you can actually do something, it's an extremely large barrier to entry. In the early days of crypto, the journey I took was very different. When I first started working with Bitcoin, I actually went to a Bitcoin faucet and got 0.01 Bitcoins, which was less than $1 at the time and is probably hundreds of dollars now. But it allowed me to start interacting with the ecosystem. At the time, there weren't a lot of other alternatives. If you didn't have money to pay transaction fees, there was no way that you could actually interact with this ecosystem at all. But there are other techniques and approaches that you can use now. The Web3 journey is, Web3 is a journey. I would imagine most folks in this room are pretty far along that, right? You probably have a self-custody wallet. You've hold multiple tokens not on exchanges. You've interacted with one or more dApps. Maybe you've even dabbled in DeFi. For users that are just starting out, just keys and passphrases can be daunting. The lack of a password reset for a self-custodied identity can be a major barrier for folks when they first start out. Demanding that a new user in the space understand it all at once results in a lot of them either bouncing off or walking away from the space, or even thinking it's potentially a scam because you're telling them they have to go buy something before they can even register an account. Frequency and DSMP target the social space. If we look at these stats here, the social space today has over 5 billion people in it, whereas the best estimates, and this is a number that's hard to actually come up with exact numbers for, there's an estimate of somewhere between 425 and 500 million users that own crypto today. And even then, 150 million of them own it on an exchange. They don't have it in a wallet where they could actually use it with a dApp or something like that. Another aspect of these numbers is where we are in the adoption cycle. Generally, the innovator step of adoption is 2.5%, and the early adopter is 13.5%. To get to the early mainstream of 34%, you have to get over those first two hurdles. And if you look here just at the difference in these numbers, we're still very early in the early adopter lifecycle from a crypto standpoint. There's actually around the same number of users that own crypto today as were on the internet in the year 2000. So the experiences that we might see as normal are still those like early modem dial-up days, if you will, of the internet. So I think that there's a lot of ways and approaches that we can take to actually make this experience better. Another aspect when you look at this is the median per capita income worldwide is only $2,920. This not only means that current crypto fees can be a problem if you're trying to onboard a large number of users worldwide, but actually taking the investment risk and the arbitrage risk and the KYC costs can be daunting as well and keep users from being able to participate. So this is another aspect of why Coinless users are such an important aspect of adoption into the space. Sorry, I'm having trouble with my clicker here. And finally, why Coinless users? It's a trend. You'll see this with Ethereum, with their paymasters and their autonomous accounts. You see this with ICP and the reverse gas costs. And you also see it with MetaMask and their new delegation framework, which is structured for a couple of things, but one of which is to be able to redirect gas costs from users to developers. All are trying to solve a problem of users being in control while letting someone else pay for their gas. They differ in the details, but they're all trying to accomplish the same kind of core goal. So if you agree that Coinless users are a good idea, how can a user actually be coinless? Whether custodial or non-custodial, the user has a key that they use to control their identity. In frequency, identity is called an MSA, but the keys that control it are literally called control keys. Users can still sign transactions. They can still control their interactions with the chain, and the cost is shifted to the developer side. Frequency uses delegation extensively, and it's a core component of our MSA palette. We use delegation with MeWe to make the onboarding and usage much simpler. Further, how can a user be coinless? Developers pay the gas fees. A key aspect of delegation that we use is not only allows an app to pay for transaction, it also avoids users having to sign every transaction when they interact with a particular application. However, just because apps pay gas fees doesn't mean that the users are giving in to surveillance capitalism. Instead, we're shifting the business models. Instead of users interacting with exchanges and a chain to acquire tokens to then be able to use an application, the apps are taking care of the gas costs. The question is, doesn't this just lead to the same problems that we've seen in Web 2? While advertising is a viable model in this mode, it's not the only model that's viable. Subscriptions, freemium models, and other approaches are also models that work. The key aspects here are, one, the user can use payment methods they're already familiar with and have access to. Two, it minimizes user upfront investment in interacting with applications in the space. Three, it shifts any arbitrage risk from each user, who are sort of ill-informed and ill-equipped to make decisions about that, to application developers who are well-informed and knowledgeable in the space. And four, it aligns with current App Store and ecosystem payment rails, i.e. in-app purchase, app purchases, refunds, etc. MeWe, Frequency's first scaled partner, follows this freemium model and has onboarded over 1 million users, almost 1 million users to date, onto the chain following this. And it allows users to access their data while MeWe can pay the gas costs. So the next question is, how does Frequency support coinless users? The mechanics of this are users sign delegation requests, and the application submits them to the chain for payment. But that leads to a question of, if a user's in control of their data, will an app actually sponsor them revoking that application's access to their data set? One of the things that we've done here is actually make the gas costs for creating a delegation prepay the revocation costs. So either the app or the user, even if they're coinless, can revoke that access in the future with no additional fee. And allows users to remain in control even without coins if they want to revoke access from a particular app. It's all about incentivizing, aligning the incentives at a particular point in time, which is when the user wants to start using the app, both the app and the user have an incentive to make that delegation happen. And at a later point, when maybe their incentives are not aligned, the user still has the ability to control their data set. The second piece of how Frequency supports coinless users is capacity. So users can delegate access to apps, and the apps are taking this sort of arbitrage risk of the coins versus the user themselves. But how does the application protect itself? How does it manage volatility? How does it manage this overall risk of coins from a business model perspective? I talked about this a bit at Decoded in 2022, but our capacity model addresses the concerns brought about by marginal cost pricing. This concept is the last seat on an airplane selling more than the first seat did. Or another, that extra watt of energy used for an air conditioning during a summer heat wave costing more than the first watt. these are super common from a pricing model perspective and lead to high levels of unpredictability when applications are actually trying to interact with the chain. Capacity is a staking model that allows applications to actually lower the overall volatility of the gas market by staking tokens to receive capacity, which can be used to pay for transaction fees. The capacity refills on a periodic basis, and the staking rate that the application receives is locked in at the point they do the staking, giving them a reliable model. This shifts the cost to being the opportunity cost of the staked tokens versus a direct transaction fee cost. This might be familiar to anyone who's participated in a parachain lease model or something like that. It's very similar in concept. And lastly, Frequency supports Coinless users because of Polkadot. The cost of supporting users on the social side is a super sensitive aspect to the overall business models. Social is a very high volume, low individual message value space. So the ability to share consensus with other chains actually drastically lowers the overall transaction pricing, allowing for applications to be able to sort of endure the cost of users' transaction fees. The second is the parachain model allows us to actually customize Frequency in a number of ways while still sharing a common consensus model. So we don't end up with the need of working just the way one particular chain works and trying to run a smart contract or something on top of it. We can actually customize the core mechanisms to be suited to the particular use cases. And then finally, the substrate has allowed us to build all of this much faster. We can take the palettes that we need, and we can take the technology that isn't core to our use cases and incorporate the work that others have done to be able to still get that functionality from a chain perspective. And that's the talk.
Thank you, Harry. Very good talk before we go into the break. I personally love Web3 Social, so I really admire what you guys are building, especially in Polkadot. Are there any questions from the audience? Why Frequency? Why maybe on Polkadot? Yes, please.
Hi, thank you for your excellent talk. I wanted to know about the business model, if you have one for Frequency, meaning you are talking about sharing the gas cost, etc. But is the user going to pay a subscription, or how is the business model, so to say, to sustain the social network?
Absolutely. So we view Frequency as providing sort of infrastructure that applications run on top of. So our primary sort of customer for purchasing tokens for utility on the chain is applications versus individual users. There are also use cases for tokens, but the primary use case is for applications to buy tokens to stake to gain capacity. And then Frequency tokens are priced based on that utility value. Is that?
Yeah, all right. I misunderstood. I thought that the Frequency network was intended for users, not for dApps that could build on top of it.
Gotcha. Yeah, sorry. It is our primary focus is on providing the infrastructure for applications like MeWe that I mentioned, for example, to be able to build on top of. So MeWe has tokens that they stake on the Frequency network for capacity, and they provide the social networking service to the user using the capabilities of the chain itself, which is a portable social networking graph and universal content.
All right. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Maybe
any other questions?
From my side, because Web3 Social is a lot of off-chain data, right? I mean, Web3 Social overall is off-chain. Now you put most of the things on-chain because you want to interact, you want to provide like the interaction. What challenges did you face there, or how did you solve this problem to bring off-chain social data on-chain?
So it's actually been a real challenge to model this. So there's a very fine balance on the data that we put on-chain and the data that stays off-chain. So for example, user identity and social graph are on frequency are on-chain. The actual content itself on frequency is off-chain, but there are what we call announcements which point to the off-chain content that allow people to discover that that content exists via the chain, but the actual reading of media, et cetera, is done off of chain via HTTP or IPFS.
Yep.
So there's a real balancing act there between both the cost associated with putting data on-chain or off-chain, as well as the composability of on-chain data. Moving too much data off-chain means that a lot of useful use cases become much more difficult and become more sort of oracle in nature, which we try to avoid.
And the security part again, right? If you move
Absolutely.
to blockchain, how can we ensure transparency, security that we have on the blockchain at all? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Great. Yeah. One question. Yes. Go ahead. Wait, we have a hot mic, Angie. Yeah. On?
Yeah. Okay, good. So what is the best way for you to get to users? The applications on top, meaning the social media applications, how are you kind of evangelizing the message?
Absolutely. So our core approach to date has been what we term sort of a Web 2.5 strategy. I'm sure you've heard this term many times before. What we mean when we say that, since it's a pretty amorphous term, is that frequency is focused on meeting users where they are. So looking at existing apps with existing scale and working with them to actually be able to convert their applications and migrate their user base onto the chain so that users that are using those apps today can gain the additional utility that frequency provides without necessarily having to switch the experiences that they already enjoy. I think a lot of other folks in the space have actually required users, if they want to get the utility involved in something like this, to actually switch apps. They have to make a new bet on how they interact versus just gaining this additional functionality and utility.
An example.
Well, the example I think I give would be MeWe that I mentioned. So MeWe is a social network that's been around for 12 or so years. They have 20 million registered users. They have almost 1 million users that have migrated to frequency. And the users, like I mentioned, of Web3 being a journey, have been on a journey over the last year and a half. So it started with users opting in for identity and sort of handle to be put on chain along with some delegations. And now a number of MeWe users are actually also migrating social graph onto the chain as well. So it's a sort of incremental set of steps there from an existing Web 2 social network into this sort of Web3 world.
I think it's a great use case to onboard users, social, because Web3 or social is being used so much. The challenge is how do we bring it on chain, as you explained, but it is a very killer use case, I think, for the blockchain.
Yeah. And just a shout out to Mark Liu, who's sitting in the front there, who's the product manager for MeWe.
Woo! Thank you so much, Harry.